12 unpleasant things seniors do as they age. The truth no one warns you about. You know, there's something quietly powerful about sitting across from someone who's lived through it all. Someone who has watched the world spin through decades of change, survived heartbreak and joy, raised families, built lives, lost things they never thought they could live without, and still wakes up every morning with a beating heart and something to say. There's a gravity to that kind of presence, but not everyone notices it. See, we tend to romanticize aging from a distance. We talk about golden years, wisdom, peace, but we skip over the grit, the parts no one warns you about, the uncomfortable truth, the behaviors that make us pause, that we label as strange, stubborn, difficult, when really they're symptoms of something deeper. Something that deserves to be understood, not That's what this is about. This isn't just a list of quirks you'll notice in the elderly. This is a window into the messy human and often misunderstood transformations that come with age. Because aging doesn't just change your body, it rewires your priorities, your patience, your voice. And somewhere in the middle of all that, the mask comes off, the polite scripts fade, and what's left is raw, real, unapologetically human. The thing is, a lot of these changes are unpleasant, not because they're wrong, but because they challenge us. They make us question our pace, our distractions, our assumptions about what it means to live well. We see an older person snap at a stranger, or withdraw from the world, or speak a little too freely, and we forget. This isn't weakness. This is survival. This is clarity. If you've ever watched an aging parent shift before your eyes, or seen a grandparent slowly pull away from who they used to be, you know what I mean. There's a quiet unraveling that happens, and it's not always pretty, but hidden inside that unraveling is something sacred, something that can teach us how to live better now, if we're willing to look a little closer. So today we're going to talk about the 12 things seniors do as they age that most people don't want to talk about. The stuff no one tells you because it's awkward or uncomfortable or just too real. But I promise you it's exactly where the gold is. Stick with me. Let's go there together. Number 1, they start speaking the raw truth, and it can be unsettling. There's this moment, usually somewhere in the later chapters of life, when something shifts. It's not announced. It doesn't come with a trumpet or a warning. One day a senior in your life, maybe a parent, a grandparent, or even an older neighbor, just starts telling it like it is. No sugarcoating, no softening. Just the raw, unfiltered truth. And let's be honest, sometimes it stings. It can feel like they've lost their tact, like they're being rude or overly blunt. But more often than not, this shift isn't about being mean. It's about finally giving themselves permission to say what they've always wanted to say. You see, for most of their lives, they played by the rules. They bit their tongues in meetings, smiled politely at things that frustrated them, agreed for the sake of peace, said yes when they meant no. But time has a funny way of stripping away what's unnecessary. And when you've lived long enough, you realize how much time you spent cushioning the truth for the comfort of others. At some point, that becomes too heavy to carry. So they start saying what they really think about your haircut, about your career choices, about the news, about the way the world's changing, and not always for the better. They might say things that are outdated or politically incorrect. Sometimes they miss the nuance. But it's not coming from an ace of malice. It's coming from a deep desire to be real, finally. It's hard to hear sometimes, especially if it feels like a personal attack. But if you can step back and really listen, you might notice something incredible. This is their way of passing on what they've learned. They don't have time anymore for small talk or pretending. They're trying to hand you something. A hard-won truth, a piece of clarity, a perspective built on years you haven't lived yet. And yeah, it can be uncomfortable, but there's wisdom inside that discomfort. if you're willing to sit with it instead of swatting it away. Number 2, they withdraw from social circles, but not out of bitterness. One of the most misunderstood behaviors of aging is withdrawal. People notice it in their aging parents or grandparents. The social invitations declined, the long phone calls that stop coming, the empty seats at family gatherings, and the assumption, almost always, is the same. They must be sad, they must be lonely, they must be depressed. But that's not always the truth. Sometimes, seniors pull back not because they've lost their joy, but because they've found their peace. Think about it. For decades they showed up. For work, for family, for community. They navigated social expectations, smiled through discomfort, entertained conversations they didn't care for, made effort when they were exhausted. There was always a birthday party, a school event, a work dinner, a favor to be done. They were stretched thin, often silently. So now, when they begin stepping away from the noise, it's not bitterness. It's relief. It's the long-awaited right to say no, to protect their energy, to trade the chaos of crowds for the calm of solitude, to stop explaining themselves and just exist. It's not that they don't care about you anymore. They do, deeply, but they're shifting into a different rhythm, one that doesn't rely on constant conversation or busy calendars. They may still love their family, cherish their friends, smile when they see your name on their phone, but they no longer feel the need to be everywhere for everyone, all the time. And here's something to consider. Withdrawal isn't always a disappearance. Sometimes it's a quiet return to self, to inner life, to memories. A lot of seniors start reflecting more, processing things they never had time to feel before. They start writing, reading, walking. There's a sacred stillness in that retreat, and it deserves respect. Yes, there are times when isolation is a red flag, when it signals depression or pain. But not always. Sometimes it's just a boundary finally being drawn, a soft rebellion against a world that never let them rest. So if you notice someone older stepping back, don't panic. Don't pressure them to be who they used to be. Instead, ask yourself, what kind of peace have they finally found? And how can I honor that without trying to fix it? Because maybe they haven't lost their spark. Maybe they're just letting it burn quieter now, where it's warmest. Number 3, they get stubborn. But it's not just stubbornness. You've probably seen it before. That firm no to something that seems harmless. The refusal to try something new, whether it's a phone upgrade, a different food, or a change in daily routine. The lines in the sand start to appear, and suddenly, your once flexible loved one is now unwilling to budge on the smallest things. At first glance, it looks like plain old stubbornness. And to be fair, sometimes it is. But most of the time, it's more layered than that. What you're seeing isn't just resistance, it's protection. See, aging brings a kind of vulnerability that most of us don't think about. Your body changes, your memory falters, your independence begins to wobble. And in the midst of all that, what once felt like solid ground starts to feel slippery. So seniors start gripping tighter to the things that still feel stable. The familiar routines, the predictable meals, the tried and true ways of doing things. That's not being difficult. That's survival. Imagine if, after decades of being the one everyone leaned on, suddenly you're the one needing help. Imagine how unsettling it must feel to not trust your balance, or your reflexes, or your ability to remember someone's name. In a world that's racing ahead with new technology and new ideas, digging your heels in doesn't feel like stubbornness. It feels like safety. And let's not forget, older adults have earned their convictions. They've lived through wars, recessions, cultural shifts, losses, victories. They've watched values change and traditions fade. When they push back, it's not always because they're closed-minded. Sometimes it's because they've seen what happens when people chase every new idea without thinking it through. Of course, there's a balance. Sometimes the rigidity becomes isolating. But before you label it as cranky or irrational, try asking what fear lives underneath it. What experience shaped that reaction? What memory, what heartbreak, what trauma lives in the background of that no? Because when you see the human underneath the behavior, it stops being annoying. It starts being deeply, achingly real. Number 4, they repeat themselves, but it's more than forgetfulness. We've all had those conversations, the ones where a grandparent or older loved one tells you the same story for the third, fourth, fifth time. At first it's sweet, then it gets a little frustrating, and eventually you start finishing their sentences in your head, waiting for it to end so you can move on. But what if those repeated stories aren't just slips in memory? What if they're signals? Yes, cognitive decline can play a role. Memory fades, and certain neural pathways begin to weaken. That's a biological reality of aging. But there's something more soulful happening too. Something that's easy to miss if you're not really listening. When a senior tells the same story over and over, they're often reaching for something. Maybe it's a moment when they felt proud, or seen, or safe. Maybe it's a story they never fully processed, and now they're trying to make sense of it. Maybe it's grief that never got words, or joy that wants to live again. Repetition is a form of emotional excavation. It's also a way to leave something behind. Think about it. As people age, they start to reckon with legacy, with the idea that they won't be here forever. So those stories become a kind of message in a bottle, a way to pass down what mattered, what made them, what broke them, and what healed them. It's not always about memory, it's about meaning. And here's the beautiful and hard part. Every time they tell it, they're asking you to hold it, to remember it, to carry it forward in some small way. Because that story, no matter how many times you've heard it, is a piece of them they don't want the world to forget. So instead of brushing it off, try leaning in. Ask questions. Fill in the parts you already know with patience, not frustration. Because one day, when their voice is gone, you'll realize those repeated words weren't just stories. They were inheritance. Number 5, they stop caring what people think, radically. There's a moment in life, and it almost always comes with age, when the invisible pressure to be likable, presentable, agreeable, just evaporates. And when it does, it can catch everyone else off guard. You'll notice it in the little things first. They stop dressing to impress. They say what they're actually thinking in the middle of a polite conversation. They might not laugh at a joke just because everyone else is. They speak up in places where most people stay quiet, and it can feel a little jarring, like they've forgotten the rules of how to be in public. But here's the thing. They didn't forget. They just stopped pretending to care. See, for most of their lives, they cared deeply about appearances, about how others viewed them, about fitting in, about doing the right thing in the eyes of their community, family, church, or peers. They wore the mask because they had to keep the peace, to keep a job, to keep things moving. But when you start to realize that you've got more time behind you than in front of you, something shifts. You begin to wonder, why did I spend so much time holding back my real thoughts? Why did I water myself down to make others more comfortable? You start seeing that people's opinions don't actually change your life, not in the ways that matter. And so they begin to live a little louder, or messier, or quieter, depending on what they really wanted all along. To others, it can look like they're becoming rude, or cold, or selfish, but often it's the opposite. They're becoming honest, unapologetically so. And for a lot of people, especially younger generations, it can be a bit of a wake-up call, because when someone stops performing for approval, it reveals how much we still are. Here's a radical truth. Many seniors don't stop caring what others think because they've grown hard or bitter. They stop because they've finally found peace in who they are, and they know how precious little time they have to live fully in that truth. And maybe that's something we could all learn from a little earlier. Number 6. They might seem judgmental, but it's a cry for meaning. Let's talk about that moment when your grandmother says something wildly outdated, or your dad makes a harsh comment about how things used to be better, and the room goes tense. You cringe a little. You want to correct them. You want to defend the world you live in, the values you hold. But pause for a second. Listen beneath the words. What you're hearing might not be judgment. It might be grief. As people age, they don't just grow older, they lose things. Familiarity, culture, routine, a sense of being needed. The world changes faster than they can adjust, and suddenly, they feel like strangers in the same places they once helped build. And when that happens, it's easy to sound critical. It's easy to say things like, people these days don't know how to work, or nobody respects anything anymore, or back in my day. And yes, it can sound like they're looking down on the world, but more often they're mourning the one they lost. This sense of judgment isn't always about superiority. It's about disconnection. They want to understand the changes, but they don't always have the language, the energy, or the tools. And when you've spent a lifetime building beliefs that once made sense, watching them be questioned or discarded can feel like watching your identity unravel. So what seems like criticism is often fear. Fear that their values no longer matter. Fear that they've been left behind. Fear that everything they once stood for is now being dismissed as outdated or irrelevant. And underneath that fear is a plea. Does any of what I lived through still matter to you? It's not always easy to hold space for that, especially when the words feel harsh or unfair. But if you can lean into the discomfort, ask questions instead of firing back, you might find a surprising tenderness under the edge, a longing to stay connected, a desire to pass something on, even if it comes out awkwardly, because most of the time, seniors aren't judging the world. They're just trying to make peace with the fact that it's moved on without them. And that's not a reason to push them away. That's a reason to lean in closer. Number 7, they downsize their lives, and it's not just about space. At first it looks like they're just decluttering. The boxes start piling up. The china cabinet gets emptied, furniture disappears, closets shrink, heirlooms are passed on or sold. Suddenly the home you've always known starts to feel a little more hollow. It's easy to assume this is about practicality, and on the surface, yes, it often is. Seniors downsize because the house is too big to manage. The stairs are no longer safe, or the energy it takes to maintain things just isn't worth it anymore. But beneath the surface, something far more profound is happening. This isn't just about making space in a house. It's about making peace in a life. Over time, people collect not just possessions, but emotional weight. Every item in that attic or basement holds a story, a memory, a moment that once felt too important to let go of. But aging brings clarity, and one of the clearest revelations is this: I don't need all of this anymore. They begin to see how much of their identity was wrapped up in what they owned. The dishes they never used but kept just in case. The clothes that no longer fit but carried the scent of a time when they did. The furniture bought during better financial years. The boxes of their children's toys. The stacks of paper, photos, plans, all of it tethered to a life that was once in motion. Letting it go is not easy. It's not mindless. It's a quiet grief and a quiet release, happening at the same time. But with that letting go comes something beautiful: freedom. The more they release, the lighter they feel. What they're doing is stripping life down to the essentials, not because they've stopped caring, but because they finally know what matters. So when a senior gives something away, even if it's small, know that it's an act of trust. It's a gift, yes, but it's also a message. Take this. Remember me. and know that I no longer need this to remember who I am. Downsizing isn't just a physical act, it's a spiritual one. Number 8. They talk about death a lot. It might start as a quiet comment, a mention of funeral plans, or where important documents are kept, or a casual "when I go" dropped into conversation like it's nothing. But over time, the theme repeats. You'll hear about who they want to speak at their service, where they want to be buried, who gets what song should play. You might even catch them writing their own obituary. It can be jarring, morbid, even, especially if you're younger, still living in a world that feels full of tomorrows. But here's the truth. They're not obsessed with death. They're just making peace with it. When you're young, death feels like something far off, abstract. But when you age, it becomes real, not just as an idea, but as a presence. You've seen friends go, loved ones, partners. You've watched the obituary section grow longer with names you know, and eventually, the realization sets in. I'm not an exception. I'm next, sooner or later. That's not depressing. That's clarity. Talking about death isn't about giving up. It's about getting ready, not just logistically, but emotionally, spiritually. It's about reclaiming control over something that once felt too big to face. Seniors talk about death because they're brave enough to face what most people avoid. They're trying to find words for the mystery, trying to hand you pieces of their life so you'll know what mattered, even after they're gone. And often they're trying to soften the blow for you. They know you're scared to lose them. They know you change the subject, or laugh it off, or tell them to stop being so negative. But inside, they're quietly trying to give you a gift: preparation, a chance to talk, before the silence comes. So the next time they bring it up, don't shut them down. Don't deflect. Ask, listen, be brave with them. Because in those conversations, you'll find a different kind of intimacy, one that's less about fear and more about love. Number 9. They lose patience, but not compassion. You've probably seen it. The eye roll when someone takes too long at the checkout counter. The sharp response to a simple question. The frustration that bubbles up over something small. A misheard word. A forgotten appointment. A mess left behind. It's easy to think they're just getting grumpier with age. Less tolerant. Less kind. But that's not the full story. The truth is, most seniors don't lose their compassion. They lose their capacity. Patience requires energy, and energy becomes more precious with age. The body doesn't bounce back like it used to. Sleep isn't as restful. Pain is more constant. Noise becomes overwhelming. And the brain, that beautiful, complex machine, starts to fatigue faster. So things that once felt manageable now feel exhausting. It's not that they don't care. In fact, many older adults become even more emotionally sensitive as they age. They feel more, they empathize more, they cry more easily. But they also reach their limit faster because they're carrying a lifetime of memories, worries, and pain. What looks like irritation is often just overload, and there's something else happening too. Seniors have been through enough to know what really matters and what doesn't. So when they snap at bureaucracy or inefficiency or drama, it's not because they're mean. It's because they see through the noise. They know time is short, and they don't want to waste it. They don't have the luxury of pretending anymore. Still, it's important to recognize when that edge becomes sharp. Sometimes chronic frustration is a sign that they're overwhelmed or under-supported. Sometimes it's loneliness in disguise, but more often than not, they're still compassionate, just not in the way you're used to. Watch their actions. Notice how they soften with a child, how they show up for someone in need, how they cry at old songs or worry about people who don't even know they care. Patience may fade, but the heart, more often than not, remains wide open. Number 10, they obsess over health. But it's not vanity. The pills, the appointments, the diets, the routines, the endless conversations about symptoms, side effects, blood pressure, digestion, and what hurts today. You might find yourself zoning out during the fifth recap of a doctor visit. You might wonder why it's all they seem to talk about lately. But to them, health isn't small talk. It's survival. See, when you're younger, health is often something you take for granted. You bounce back from illness. You push through pain. You don't think twice about standing, walking, lifting, eating whatever you want. But when you're older, everything changes. Your body becomes unfamiliar territory. You start to wonder what each new ache means. You lose trust in your own strength. And suddenly, managing your body becomes a full-time job. To others, it might look like an obsession, but it's really about control, because so much else feels out of their hands. The body, once strong and automatic, now requires constant attention. A skipped pill could mean a hospital visit. A missed symptom could be something serious. So yes, they track everything. They research everything. They remind you of their appointments. They ask the same health questions over and over because they're afraid. Afraid of pain, afraid of losing independence, afraid of becoming a burden, afraid of dying. And underneath all of that is something even deeper, a longing to stay here. With you. In this life. Not because they're clinging, but because they still have things they want to see. People they want to love. Memories they still hope to make. So the next time they launch into a story about their blood pressure, or tell you for the third time how much sodium is in their soup, try to hear what they're really saying. I want to keep living. I'm trying so hard to stay. Number 11. They tell the same stories, and it's a gift if you listen. You know how it goes. The same story comes out again, almost word for word. That tale about the blizzard in '63, the family vacation where everything went wrong, the old job, the childhood friend, the first time they met your grandmother. You've heard it, maybe too many times, and part of you wants to smile and nod, while another part of you drifts away, wishing for a new topic. But here's the thing. Repetition isn't always a sign of fading memory. Sometimes it's legacy in disguise. When seniors repeat stories, they're not always forgetting, they're remembering, over and over, because the story means something. It marked them. It shaped them. It's how they process and preserve the meaning of their life. And telling it again is how they make sure it's not lost. It's easy to dismiss those stories as already heard. But to them, it's not just a story. It's a piece of who they are. And with every telling, they're not just sharing an event. They're offering you a key to their heart, a look into what moved them, scared them, delighted them, or broke them. And sometimes that repetition is more than nostalgia. It's reconciliation. Some stories get told again and again because they weren't fully understood the first time, even by the one telling it. There are memories they're still trying to make peace with, regrets that keep surfacing, triumphs they want someone to validate, pain that still echoes, joy they want to relive while they still can. So when they tell you that same old story, again, try something different. Ask a new question about it. Interrupt, not to correct, but to explore. What did that feel like? What happened after that? What would you have done differently? Watch their eyes light up. Watch their memory deepen, because in the end, those stories are a gift. One day they'll stop telling them. One day you'll wish you could hear that story just one more time. So lean in while you can. Listen like it matters, because it does. Number 12. They begin to see through life, and they want you to. As people age, something subtle and profound happens. They start to see through it all. The social games, the status chases, the need to be right, the endless busyness, the approval seeking, the fears that once ruled their days. It's like the fog clears, and they suddenly recognize how much of life was noise, and they don't just see it, they feel it. It's why older people often become quiet in the middle of chaos, why they don't rush to argue anymore, why they let go of old grudges, or stop trying to impress people. They've lived long enough to realize most of it doesn't matter, and the things that do, love, peace, presence, vivis, are often the things we ignore until it's almost too late. They start living simpler, but not because they're less capable, because they're more awake. And here's the beautiful, sometimes painful part. They desperately want to pass that clarity on to you. But they don't always know how. Sometimes it comes out as unsolicited advice. Sometimes it sounds like criticism. Sometimes it's silence, a refusal to engage in things that once stirred them. You might think they've stopped caring, but in truth, they're just seeing from a higher altitude. They know what's waiting on the other side of the climb, and they're trying awkwardly, imperfectly to help you avoid the same traps. They want you to let go of grudges faster, love your people harder, stop wasting time on what doesn't fill you. They want you to forgive yourself, to stop chasing things that won't matter when you're 80, to pay attention now, before the final chapters arrive. And yes, sometimes their clarity makes them seem distant, otherworldly, like they're already 1 foot out of this life. But maybe that's exactly the point. They see through life now, and they want you to open your eyes too, not to scare you, to free you. Conclusion: the sacred unraveling. Aging is often painted in soft pastels, all golden hours and quiet wisdom. But the truth? It's messier than anyone tells you. It's not always gentle. It's not always graceful. Sometimes it's raw and loud and heartbreaking. Sometimes it looks like forgetting, withdrawing, snapping, or holding on too tightly to things that no longer seem to matter. But here's the sacred truth beneath it all. It's not a breakdown. It's an unraveling, not the kind that destroys, the kind that reveals. Strip by strip, layer by layer, the roles, expectations, and personas fall away. The pressure to be agreeable, the fear of judgment, the chase for approval. Even the body begins to let go, to slow down, to return to earth. And in that slow unraveling, what's left is the truest version of a person. And it's easy to miss, especially when you're standing on the outside. It's easy to see only the difficult parts, the repeated stories, the health worries, the sharp edges, the withdrawn silences. It's easy to call it decline, but maybe it's something deeper. Maybe it's a return to what's real, to what matters, to the bare essential heart of a person who has lived, who has loved, who has lost, and who is now looking back, not with regret, but with clarity. Our elders aren't just getting older. They're becoming mirrors. They're showing us what it means to let go of everything that isn't necessary and to hold fiercely to what is. Love, truth, peace, presence, connection. The 12 things we talked about, they might seem unpleasant, but they are not signs of failure. They are signs of transformation. They are the body and soul working together to make sense of a lifetime before it ends. And if we're wise, we won't meet these changes with annoyance or fear. We'll meet them with reverence. Because one day, we'll be the ones telling the same stories, the ones forgetting names, the ones letting go of things that once defined us. One day, we'll be the ones hoping someone younger will look us in the eyes and still see us. Not a problem to fix, but a soul still unfolding. So take care of your elders. Listen longer. Ask deeper questions. Hold their stories like they're sacred, because they are. And remember, aging isn't a slow fading into nothingness. It's the final blooming, and it deserves to be witnessed with love.